The super empath they can't stop thinking about, day or night. There's a certain kind of person we never forget. Not because they were loud, not because they demanded attention, but because they saw us, they felt us, they understood things we couldn't even put into words. That's the super empath. Now, when we hear the word empath, we often imagine someone soft, maybe even a little passive. But the super empath, they're on a whole different level. This is the person who has a radar for truth. They can feel your mood shift before you say a single word. And not only do they notice, they care. But don't confuse their care for weakness, because the super empath also walks away the moment they feel their kindness is being exploited. And that is when they become unforgettable, because people remember how you made them feel, but they never forget the person who made them feel safe, seen, and then strong enough to face themselves. The reason they can't stop thinking about you, day or night, isn't because of the attention you gave them. It's because of the attention you gave yourself. It's the balance, the duality, the heart that listens deeply but doesn't beg to be heard, the presence that nurtures but doesn't chase, the soul that understands and still says no when needed. You became the mirror they never found in anyone else. And when someone loses that, the mix of empathy, strength, and peace, it doesn't matter how many texts they get or dates they go on. They'll keep thinking about the one who was rare enough to feel like home and strong enough to leave the moment home stopped feeling safe. That's the super empath. And if that's you, don't ever water it down. A super empath is often misunderstood. People assume that being deeply sensitive means being fragile, overly emotional, or easily manipulated. But that couldn't be further from the truth. What makes a super empath unique isn't just that they feel things deeply. It's that they understand those feelings with precision. They're emotionally intelligent. They don't just absorb emotions. They read between the lines, catch the unspoken shifts in tone, and recognize patterns others miss. That awareness gives them power, not weakness. This emotional radar allows them to respond instead of react. Where most people are quick to take things personally or jump to conclusions, the super empath slows down. They process. They ask questions. They seek to understand rather than attack. And because of this, they often bring a sense of calm and groundedness to their relationships. People feel safe around them, not just because of their kindness, but because of their clarity. What sets them apart even further is their ability to hold space for others while still staying rooted in who they are. They don't lose themselves in someone else's chaos. That's the real strength, not being unaffected, but being anchored. Even when emotions run high, they don't become reactive or manipulative. They can sit with discomfort. They can listen without needing to fix. They can love someone fully and still walk away if their peace is being compromised. This balance between deep empathy and emotional boundaries creates a unique kind of presence. It's disarming. When you're with a super empath, you don't feel judged, but you do feel seen. And that can be terrifying for someone who's not ready to be that exposed. It's why so many people are drawn to them and then struggle to handle the intensity of that connection. The super empath doesn't play roles. They don't do surface level intimacy. They want the real you, and they're willing to show up as the real them. But don't mistake their quiet strength for naivety. They notice everything. They may not call it out right away, but they file it away. And when patterns repeat or respect fades, they don't create drama. They simply step back. That moment is what leaves the deepest impact, because the same empathy that made someone feel safe becomes the mirror that forces them to confront their own behavior. Empathy with strength is rare, and once someone experiences it, they won't forget it. There's a difference between being liked and being felt. Super empaths don't just make a good impression. They create an experience. When you're with them, you feel like you can exhale for the first time in a long time. They tune in so deeply that it almost feels like they can hear what you're not saying. They ask questions that matter. They pay attention to the details. And when you speak, they actually listen, not just to the words, but to what's behind them. That kind of presence is magnetic. It creates a kind of emotional intimacy that's incredibly rare. You start to feel known in ways that go far beyond surface conversations. You find yourself opening up without even realizing you're doing it. Not because they're pulling it out of you, but because their energy gives you permission to be honest. They don't try to fix you or impress you. They just see you. And for people who've spent their lives performing or hiding parts of themselves, that kind of space feels like oxygen. This is why a super empath is so unforgettable. It's not because of the words they said or the grand gestures they made. It's because of how they made someone feel in those quiet, vulnerable moments. They created a connection that felt effortless but meaningful, soft but stable. In a world where most people are too distracted or self-involved to offer genuine presence, the super empath stands out simply by being there in the way others aren't. But there's another layer to it. The super empath isn't driven by a need to be loved or validated. They're not offering this connection in hopes of getting something back. That's what makes it feel so safe. You're not being evaluated, you're being embraced. And that kind of energy disarms the usual defenses people carry. It drops the masks. Suddenly, you're in a space where you can be real, maybe for the first time in a long time. People don't always recognize what's happening in the moment. They might not even realize how rare that connection was until later. But once it's gone, the absence is undeniable. They'll find themselves thinking back to the person who didn't just hear them, but got them, who didn't just smile politely, but understood. And in a world that's loud, fast, and often disconnected, that feeling lingers. It stays with them day or night. Empathy on its own can be beautiful, but when it exists without boundaries, it can become self-destructive. What makes the super empath unforgettable is not just their ability to feel deeply for others, but their ability to feel deeply for themselves too. They care, but they don't abandon their own needs in the process. That's the difference. Their empathy is not performative, and it's not about pleasing people. It's rooted in integrity, in knowing who they are and what they deserve even when emotions run high. There's something powerful about someone who can sit with your pain without making it about them, and who can also draw a clear line when that pain begins to cross into disrespect. A super empath doesn't just feel for you. They know how far they can go before it starts costing their own peace. That self-awareness is what makes their compassion sustainable. It's not coming from emptiness. It's coming from wholeness. Many people are used to getting close to others by creating dependency, by rescuing, fixing, or overextending themselves to feel needed. The super empath doesn't operate like that. They're not trying to be someone's savior. They'll show up for you in ways that feel supportive and present, but they won't carry your emotional weight for you. They believe in accountability. They know the difference between helping and enabling, and they aren't afraid to walk away if the relationship starts draining more than it gives. This balance is what leaves a mark. It's disarming because you're met with someone who genuinely cares, but who refuses to compromise their self-worth. They won't chase. They won't beg to be chosen. And paradoxically, that's what makes them so compelling. When you know someone could love you fully, but they won't tolerate mistreatment, you pay attention. You remember that. Their energy is a mirror. If you're ready to meet them with the same level of emotional maturity, you'll feel safe, seen, and empowered. But if you're not ready, if you're used to controlling, testing, or pushing boundaries, they won't fight you. They'll just remove themselves. And it's in their graceful exit, not a dramatic explosion, where their strength really shows. People remember that. They remember the person who had every reason to stay and still chose to protect their peace. That kind of love, grounded in empathy and backed by boundaries, is the kind that stays with you long after it's gone. When a super empath is in your life, their presence feels like calm in the middle of chaos. They're the person who listens when no one else has the patience, who notices the things you don't even say, who shows up even when you're not at your best. They give without keeping score. They connect without trying to control. And because their energy is so steady and grounding, you start to feel like they'll always be there. That's the illusion many fall into, assuming their presence is permanent. But it isn't. A super empath doesn't leave with anger. They leave with clarity. And when they do, it's not loud or messy. It's quiet, almost unsettlingly so. One day the texts stop. The space they used to hold becomes empty. You realize the emotional safety net you once relied on is no longer there, and it's in that silence that everything starts to hit. You remember the way they made you feel understood, the way you didn't have to explain yourself around them, the way you could be vulnerable without judgment. It's not just their presence that was powerful. It's the absence of it that speaks volumes. Because suddenly you feel the contrast, Other people might be fun or exciting, but they don't feel like home. They don't hold space the way the super empath did. They don't offer the same level of emotional awareness. And that difference becomes glaring when you've experienced a connection that deep and safe surface level interactions start to feel hollow. What makes it more painful is realizing that they didn't leave to punish you. They didn't try to guilt you into changing. They simply knew their worth. They gave you a chance to meet them there, and when that didn't happen, they chose themselves. That quiet departure becomes unforgettable, not because it was dramatic, but because it forced you to face the reality of what you lost. You start replaying conversations, rereading old messages, trying to figure out the moment they decided to walk. But the truth is, it wasn't one moment. It was a slow recognition that their emotional investment was no longer being valued. That's what haunts people. Not the loss of attention or affection, but the loss of presence, that rare emotional space that felt safe, alive, and unconditionally human. The super empath doesn't make you miss the noise. They make you miss the peace. And that absence lingers longer than anyone expects. Being a super empath isn't about being endlessly available to others or proving your worth through sacrifice. It's about being so rooted in your own emotional truth that you don't need to chase validation. You're not driven by a desire to be seen. You already see yourself. That inner self-awareness creates a quiet kind of power, one that doesn't beg for attention, but naturally draws it. Because in a world full of people performing for approval, the one who is simply real stands out without trying. The super empath doesn't offer their energy recklessly. They're selective not because they're guarded, but because they understand the value of their emotional presence. They know what it costs to give too much of themselves to someone who isn't ready to receive it with care. That's why they don't stay where they're not respected. They don't twist themselves to fit someone else's idea of love. They love from a place of overflow, not lack. That love is whole, clean, and free from manipulation. And when it's no longer being met with reciprocity, they step away, not out of bitterness, but out of self-honor. What makes this energy so unforgettable is its rarity. Most people are used to relationships where one person needs the other to feel complete. But the super empath isn't looking to be completed. They're looking to share their fullness. And when someone isn't ready to meet them at that level, they don't try to drag them forward. They just let go with grace. That kind of maturity doesn't scream or beg or guilt. It simply exits. And the quiet confidence in that choice leaves a lasting impression. The reason they linger in people's minds is because they didn't try to force anything. They didn't play games or use drama to keep someone's attention. Their presence was never about proving they were enough. It was about offering connection and allowing others to choose whether they were capable of matching it. When that offer is declined, they don't collapse. They rise not louder, but lighter. That lightness stays with the person they walked away from, like a reminder of what was once possible. The super empath doesn't chase love. They are love, clear, present, and unapologetically self-possessed. They don't need to be remembered. They simply live in a way that makes forgetting them impossible. Because nothing is more magnetic than someone who can hold deep space for others without ever abandoning themselves. So if you've ever been told you're too sensitive, too intense, or that you care too much, let this be your reminder your depth is not a flaw. It's a filter. It filters out the shallow, the performative, the inconsistent. It reveals who's really capable of meeting you in the space where truth, vulnerability, and connection live. You don't need to become harder to be respected. You don't need to feel less to be loved. You just need to remember that your empathy, when rooted in self-respect, becomes your greatest superpower. The super empath doesn't just feel deeply, they live fully. They don't wait to be chosen. They choose themselves, and in doing so, they become unforgettable. Because being unforgettable isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. And when you show up with an open heart and strong boundaries, you'll never need to chase love because the right people won't stop thinking about you day or night. Thank you for honoring your own sensitivity and strength. Thank you for choosing growth, even when it's hard. And above all, thank you for being exactly who you are. Until next time, take care of your heart and protect your peace.